Welcome to episode 457 of Get Paid for Your Pad. And today I have a repeat guest on the podcast. Her name is Tia Castle, and she was on episode number 442, so quite recently, just in January. And we talked about how she went from master leasing to managing family-friendly homes, short-term rentals in Saragota. But we also touched on real estate investing. She has a lot of experience with that. And so we wanted to do another podcast where we really focus in on like what are the top markets to invest in for short-term rentals in the US. So welcome back to the show, Tia Castle.
Well, thank you. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you back. We had a really interesting conversation last time, and I know you have a lot of experience. You've actually had your own real estate reality TV show, correct?
Yes, I did. I've always been like a real estate junkie and kind of combined my two careers together. I did live in Hollywood for a while. And so I studied producing television and also film. But I decided that I wanted to do kind of like a remake of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous TV show. But this was all about real estate listings that were over $1 million. And so it was more about, the lifestyle of people that own these type of properties, but they were all listed homes and lots of very interesting people and lots of sports figures. And so I just really enjoyed, talking to those people.
I can imagine that must have been really interesting. Can we still watch that show or not?
You know what? Yes, you can. But I am redoing my tiacastle.com website, and that will be up next week because I am taking what was on YouTube and putting it on my channel, kind of taking back control of that. So yes, that will be up in about a week.
Awesome. Sweet. So that's by the time this podcast goes live, it should be on there. So Castle.
Oh no, I've got a deadline.
Yeah, putting some pressure on now.
I know.
CastleLuxRentals.com is the website, right?
Oh, well, I do have tiacastle.com.
Okay.
And then CastleLux Rentals is my Airbnb vacation rental business.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, we'll put those websites in the show notes so that everybody can go ahead and check it out. But yeah, what we want to talk about today is investing in short-term rentals. What are the top locations? Like, this is such a hot topic right now for a number of reasons, right? Number one is like inflation is getting out of control. We notice in Legends X in our program, we noticed that almost everybody wants to eventually own real estate, whether they do managing, whether they have some master leases. The whole goal is, to use the cash flow to actually own units into the future. So everybody is realizing that that's the wealth generator. And also you mentioned that there's a lot of lists out there. Right. And we'll dive into those. AirDNA came out with a big list. There's Mashvisor, Realtor.com, and Lodgify came out with some lists. So lots of data to look at. And one thing that's interesting that you mentioned as well is because real estate prices are so high, like people are really trying to figure out like where can we still find a good return on our investment. Right. So excited to dive into it.
Lots to cover there. Yeah. I mean, we could do this for a few hours, I think, but we'll keep it short and sweet, right? Yeah. So all those lists that you mentioned, AirDNA is, I think, probably the most popular because they really focus on short-term rentals, whereas the other lists are other companies that focus maybe on general real estate and even moving companies. And so they're a little bit more broad. But I found them all interesting when I was, comparing and contrasting them. So let's kind of highlight a few of those. So let's do AirDNA first. So they came out with one top 25 list that kind of covered large, medium, and small markets, and they sort of placed like what they thought, regardless of the size of the market, would be great investments. So number one on the list, you have a guess?
I'm looking at the list right now.
You're cheating.
I'm cheating.
No cheating. It's Maui, Hawaii. What do you think of that?
Well, that's
Have
really
you been to
interesting.
Hawaii?
Well, first of all, I've been to Hawaii a couple times.
Mhm,
I've not been to Maui. I've been to Big Island and Oahu, but Maui is
mhm,
definitely on my list. But yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind when I look at this list is that we see a number of fly to destinations versus in
mhm,
the last 2 years, every list I've seen, it was always drive to, right? So I think with
mhm,
the pandemic kind of coming to an end, at least that's what it seems like, and travel restrictions have mostly gone now.
mhm.
People are revisiting those type of places like Alaska. I see Alaska on there. I see Hawaii on
I
there.
know.
So I
Isn't
think
Alaska kind of surprising?
it is kind of
Mhm.
surprising. Yeah, it's because that's like really far away and it's like very cold, but they do have a lot of black bears, so that's pretty
Right,
cool,
right.
and grizzly
So
bears.
there's, yeah, so, it's kind of, they're still doing the destination, close destinations, because all of last year, there was a rise in destinations that people could drive to. So it wasn't about, the big cities that people would normally fly into. It was about the medium to small size cities that were actually increasing in Airbnb bookings. So Alaska, even though people aren't going to be going there in the dead of winter, there is a huge uptake and increase in people going there during the summer. Like in the peak season, this is saying that they average like 60% occupancy. And in 2021, in the summer of 2021, they averaged over 80% occupancy. 80% occupancy for any place is really, a
That's
good
very
number.
high. Yeah,
Yeah.
if that's the average, then if you're in the top 20% performing, then you're going to be crushing it.
Right, right. So we're looking at going back to Maui, Hawaii, typical home values, $802,000, and their average occupancy is 73%. So you're looking at an average daily rate of $375. And then in Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, I think that's what it is. So you're looking at typical home ownership of $237,000. So you're going to need a lot more money if you want to own something in Hawaii, right? Whereas, if you're just entering the market, then, you're going to look for something that's a lot lower priced entry. And
Yeah.
with the prices increasing, people are like, oh my gosh, where can I find something with $300,000 that I, can get a loan for, that I can spend? And the places that you can do that are dwindling. So, but Chattanooga, Tennessee is next on the list. You're looking at the average home values of $258,000 with about a 70% average occupancy. And the average revenue there is $47,000. Tennessee seems to be really, really popular on everybody's list.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And just going back to Alaska for a moment here,
Mhm.
I'm thinking, one thing that we've seen throughout the pandemic is that people are looking for remote places, and people looking for really unique experiences, right? And I'm just thinking, I don't know if it was your class where we had the couple from Alaska in Legends X.
No, I didn't get to meet them. Tell me
Okay,
about that.
so we actually had a couple from Alaska
Mhm.
in Legends X. And what I remember, you mentioned that the home prices there, of course, are a lot lower, but
Yeah.
I remember like seeing their pictures of what they were doing on the weekends, and it was like,
Mhm.
oh, we went fishing and came back with 100 wild caught salmons.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, like
Oh, wow.
that's just that's a completely different experience than like you would have in most other places. So
It
that
is.
just comes to mind where I'm thinking like, wow, it's like unique, it's remote, so it
Mhm.
kind of makes sense to see that, on the list here.
Yeah, yeah. So many of the places that are attracting people are being able to do things outdoors, being able to do the hunting and the fishing and the camping and the hiking, and really just staying out of the stuffy cities. And that just seems to be the trend. And I don't think it's going to go away, even though, COVID is kind of like being pushed out, and people are starting to travel and things are opening up now. So I think it's going to look like, in, forward looking, a combination of the two.
Yeah. But
Mhm.
also, like you mentioned, the average home value out there is like 250, just like in Tennessee. I mean,
Mhm.
with the real estate prices so high on average, like that, it also makes sense that people are looking for those places where it's still relatively affordable.
Right, right, yeah. And so, if you're an investor and you're making a business of this, there's lots of people, this is such a sexy business. A lot of people are just looking for that entry level place to go. So you don't necessarily have to be in the most amazing, location that people flock to around the world. There's so many other choices out there that you could invest in.
Yeah.
The next one on the list, let's see, we did Hawaii. There's lots of places in Hawaii on AirDNA's list. We did Alaska, Chattanooga, and then Gulfport, Biloxi, Mississippi. That's on the Gulf of Mexico, and it's got casinos and white sand beaches. You don't really hear about that too much. Have you heard about that area?
Not really. No, I'm not so familiar with Mississippi. That's I've been to New Orleans. That's in Mississippi.
Yep,
Right?
close to New Orleans. Yep,
Boom.
$155,000 average home value.
Wow, that's
Just about anybody could get
low.
into that. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And they're looking at 70% occupancy, average revenue 44K. So you look at the percentage value on that. I mean, that's a pretty good bargain there. Slidell. I don't have the right accent for that, but Slidell, Louisiana, that's 40 minutes from New Orleans as well, where the French Quarter, and you've got casinos and beaches, and also the Mississippi Gulf Coast. $225,000 average home value. Average income from rental is $69,000. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to go, that's like the top 5 on the AirDNA list. So I'm going to take a look at a different list. We can compare that. And this is realtor.com. Now, what's interesting is every list has its own way of measuring what they think is going to be a great value, right? So you can get confused, and you can be wondering, well, everybody's saying something different, so how am I supposed to go off of this and choose? Well, the list gives numbers, but it doesn't look at your why. So your why is going to make a big difference on where you go. I think the next biggest difference that you should take a look at, or not difference, but measurement, is the legality of where you're going, because a lot of these lists, they can't tell you, well, this city only has allows short-term rentals for 5 days and under, and you've only got 10 houses in this area where you can do it, or citywide, we're open, we love it, bring it on, so that's what these lists aren't telling you. So if your why is, hey, I just want a place where I can go vacation, and if it covers my taxes and my payments, I'm good, or if you're thinking, listen, I'm making a huge business out of this, and I want to go where I'm going to get the most for my money, where the values aren't going to drop, where I don't think there's a bubble that's going to happen, where my value is going to increase, and my cash on cash return is going to be there. So those are 2 way different whys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. That reminds me of when I was looking at properties to buy I was looking at different countries, and I ended up in Thailand, Philippines, and Colombia. And I had 3 major my decisions had 3 drivers. Number 1 is, as you mentioned, is like, I asked myself, would I want to stay there myself? Like, if I didn't want to stay at the unit, I'm not going to buy it, because part of the fun is going there yourself and staying there yourself. Plus, it's always easy when you're your own avatar. right? So if I really enjoy a particular unit, and I understand that people who are kind of like me are also going to enjoy that. So it's easy to target, right? Those people. And then number two is, like you mentioned, like, is it legal to run short-term rentals? And is it likely that that is not going to change in the future? Right? Those are the two aspects. And then number three was the ROI. But as you mentioned, like, it's not just about ROI, right? It's like, why do you even want to own real estate? And you know, what's the legal situation? So yeah, I think those are really important things to think about.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So keep that in mind when you're going through the list and you're trying to decide like where you really want to be. So I know that you have recently invested in Joshua Tree, and you have is it a compound called Idlewild? So anyway, yeah. So
Joshua Tree.
The realtor.com list, everybody knows what realtor.com is. They put Joshua Tree at the top of their list, and they gave like 10. I'm looking at it right now. Median price, $525,000. Average daily rate, $268,000. And they did, took a look at, okay, if you put 20% down, and your mortgage payments are about a 3% interest rate, which is old news by now. We know that you're closer to 4. But how many days would it take to break even? So they're saying in Joshua Tree, it's like 9 days based on those numbers. And the revenue growth is about 113%. What can you tell us about Joshua Tree?
Well, first of all, our property is located in Idlewild, Pine Cove, which is it's a mountain town in California. It's not very far away from Joshua Tree, but it is a different market.
I see.
But I'm familiar with Joshua Tree. I was there in 2014. Actually, when I started the podcast, one of my first podcast guests was somebody who invested in Joshua Tree. So me and Uzaifa, Uzaifa was my partner back then in the podcast. We actually one weekend we took a car and we drove up there, and it was super fun. I think it's very different now than 8 years ago. Because we do have a lot of members of our mastermind and Legends X students who are in that market. But it's been consistently showing up. Joshua Tree has been consistently showing up in these lists for the last, like, I would say 3 to 5 years.
And it is one of those nature places, right? I mean, it's places where people can go to camp, to be in the wilderness, to hike and do all those activities. And the weather is like, you don't have like that big of seasonal swings, do you? That's another thing that you want to consider.
Yeah. And it's also, actually, we just did our team experience weekend where the entire overnight success team, we all booked an Airbnb somewhere nearby where we could have a unique experience. And one of our team members actually went to Joshua Tree, and he was sharing some photos on our team call. And it just reminded me of like what a unique place it is with the stars and the colors and the Joshua Tree itself, and just being in the desert. It's just such a unique experience to be out there. So again, like, I think that's what people are looking for. It's been a trend for a while, but the way I like to think about it is like, people want something that's Instagrammable. Because these days, like, the first thing that people do when they get to an Airbnb is like they go on Instagram and they take a story.
You're right.
So it's gotta be something that's worth sharing on Instagram. If it's not, then like you got to think of something to make it Instagrammable.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes the actual house can be Instagrammable, but most of the time it's the surroundings. And I kind of use that as a barometer as to what my headline photo is going to be. Yeah. Is the house the destination, or is it the area that's the destination? Yeah. So they're kind of surprising on this realtor.com list. Number 2, Sea Isle City, New Jersey. And the median price there is $1.2 million. So average daily rate is $432. They're saying 14 days to break even. Revenue growth is about 82%. So they're putting some really high-end houses on this list. As I'm looking through the list, we've got something Lincoln City, Oregon, Sedona, Arizona, Blue Ridge, now Georgia, and Tennessee area. That's coming up on every single list. So I'll tell you, on every single list, the trend is areas around Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida. So those are like the most popular. We've got Leavenworth, Washington, Utah, Incline Village, Nevada. I don't know where that is. Do you? Is that near?
This must be near Las Vegas, I guess.
Must be, yeah, because they're at 1.7 million as far as the median price there. So, so Realtor.com is kind of an interesting take on how to look at where to invest. Now, okay, I want to look at Logify. Do you know who Logify is?
I absolutely know who Lodgify is.
Okay.
Very well. They're based in Barcelona,
Lodgify.
so I used to drop by in their office.
So they're a company that has software that manages vacation rentals, small hotels, probably a lot more. I'm not giving them, you know, I don't know them very well, but I do know that they have software to manage lodging. And so of course, lots of the Airbnbs. Yeah. So, so they are looking at markets, and they're looking at the cap rates of short-term rentals, and that's the angle that they are going at. And so they, as a rule, are suggesting that you look at between a 4 to 6% cap rate. To me, that sounds a little low than what, you know, the average investor is going to want to look at. If you talk to the average investor, they're like, I don't do anything unless I'm like at an 8 to 12% cap rate. Doesn't mean that, you know, 6 or 7 wouldn't be bad, but so top of the list, I'm just going to name the top 5. Gatlinburg, Tennessee, 8.1% cap rate. Kissimmee, Florida, which is right outside of Orlando, 6.9%. Fresno, California, 6.9. Oh, no, 6.58. Fort Myers, Florida, which is just an hour south of me, in Sarasota, Florida, 6.75. Breckenridge, Colorado, we've got 5.9. Then they've got like Havasu, South Lake Tahoe, Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, Baltimore, Maryland, Cincinnati, Ohio. So Cincinnati is at like 3.4%. So those are, you know, the top cap rates. And so do you, when you're doing your investing, how important is cap rate to you?
To me, it's pretty important because my investments are they're all cash. Like and the reason for that is that you know, because I have, it's hard for me to get a mortgage, you know, so and I had cash to invest, so I was always looking at cap rate, just going for like at least 10%, you know, which is pretty doable in international markets. At least it was like when I was buying, like, you know, this is like 4 or 5 years ago. But there's a couple of things that I noticed when is kind of going through these lists. Is number one is that list, that Logify list, has a lot of the kind of the usual suspects, right? Kind of the names that we've seen before. But also it's interesting that they have some cities, some bigger cities. You mentioned I think you mentioned Baltimore. I think you mentioned Cincinnati. I think you mentioned Fresno. Fresno is an interesting one. I don't know. I've never been to Fresno, but you know, whenever I hear people talk about it, like, I never feel like it doesn't really raise my interest to go there. Like, I don't know. Have you been there?
I have not been there. They're saying that the median home price there is $326,500, and they've got an occupancy rate of like 75%. So
that's pretty good. But the other thing I was going to say is, like, to me, those cap rates just sound really low. And that makes sense because, you know, if you're investing in the US, like, you're probably going to get a loan, right? Like where I invested in, you know, places like Colombia, Thailand, Philippines, like, you can't really get a mortgage there. If you if you do get a mortgage, it's going to be like, you're going to be paying 8, 9, 10%. So then it's almost like, you know, is it really worth it? you're not getting much leverage, it's the credit
Yeah.
markets are not as developed there. So I think
Mhm.
there's probably very few people that are investing cash on cash in developed markets like the US.
Right. Yeah. So maybe we should clarify like cap rate and cash on cash. So, your cap rate is looking at your net operating income divided by what the property value is. And but the one flaw about that is that it's more of a, a historical perspective. So you need to think, about what the values are going to be several years ahead. Of course, none of us, has that great crystal ball, but
I got one.
So you got one.
Right
Ooh, all right. I'm gonna be talking to you. So it's you want to consider your cash flow related to any upgrades you're going to be making, et cetera. And it's really for commercial properties is what cap rate has been used for. So some people consider Airbnbs as a commercial property, some don't. I'm talking about lenders and actually, sellers and lenders, both alike, and buyers. It's kind of like, where does short-term vacation rental fit in? But yeah, that's a great place to start. And then if you're looking at your cash on cash return, that's really, okay, if I'm going to be able to get a loan on this, what am I going to be able to make when you subtract what my net operating income is and what I'm going to be paying for my loan? Am I going to be making enough for the spread in between? And if I can leverage borrowing, and I'm getting between an 8 and 12% on that, that's a good deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And also right now, like, we gotta think about what's going to happen with inflation too, because inflation is at like 40 years highs. Is that gonna go back to like kind of normal levels? It's always been around 1 or 2% in the last like 20-ish years, I guess. And right now it's like 6-7%. And so the question is like, is that gonna stay up there, or is the central bank actually going to raise interest rates and bring that inflation down? So I think that's a really difficult question to answer, because we, like you said, like we can't predict the future, but it is something to consider, where you might want to do a scenario analysis of like saying like, okay, well, let's say that inflation is going to stay at 7%. Then it doesn't really make sense to invest in something that has like a 6% cap rate, right?
Right, exactly.
So I think that's something to consider too. But I think the other point, and this is something I realized, I stayed at an Airbnb near where I live in Panama City. As I mentioned, that was like our team experience weekend. And I booked an Airbnb in the mountains about an hour and a half outside of the city. And the reason I booked it was because it had an infinity pool and a hot tub with a fantastic view. Now, this place was not cheap. It was like $300 a night, for here, in the US, that might seem like a normal price, but for here, that's pretty expensive. There were other houses that were about the same size that were listed for like $100. And so what I realized as I was sitting in a hot tub, I was like,
is that your thinking place, sitting in the hot tub?
What's that?
I said, is that your thinking place, sitting in the hot tub?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I need to be in a hot tub and I need to have a view. Otherwise I can't think. No, but I mean, I was thinking this hot tub adds so much value to the experience that I'm actually willing to pay $300 a night for this place. But the house next door, that's the same size, that's the same interior design, it's the same standard of luxury. Everything is the same, except for it doesn't have that hot tub and it doesn't have that pool. That house, I probably wouldn't, pay like $100 a night. I mean, I wouldn't even want to stay there. But so what I'm thinking is like, yes, we want to look at what are the best markets to invest in. But I think it's more and more also becoming more of a question of like, okay, if I buy this house, what is the wow factor? What is the X, how do you say that? The X factor that I can create with this property? Can I invest, $20,000, or I don't know what a hot tub costs, but, or a swimming pool, but can I invest $20,000 to create that same experience that I was having in this unit that I stayed in over the weekend? Can I create that experience? That's going to actually double the rate that I can rent out at, because all of these lists are all based on averages, right?
Right.
So I think that's probably like the sort of the if I were to invest in real estate now, which, as you know, Eric and I are planning to buy two more properties this year. I think that's what we're really going to be looking at, is like, what can we do with this property to really like drive that average daily rate up by creating some experience that's like really unique. So that's kind of like where my thoughts are going, as we're going through these lists. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So you're really focusing on the cash flow related upgrades. And I think you totally hit the nail on the head, because if you can spend an extra $20,000 to $30,000 and get an extra 60 to 100 out of that, it's totally worth it. And with the competitive landscape, there's a lot more vacation rentals out there now. So you have to find a way to compete. And that's one way that you can really separate yourself. So totally agree on that. And by the way, you're looking at $50,000 to $80,000 to build a swimming pool here in Florida. No longer 20, I wish. So, if you don't have the money, then you just get a hot tub.
Yeah, I mean, a hot tub is not that expensive, right? But
It's not.
I'm just thinking, imagine like you have two homes and they're both $500,000. All right. And then let's say you do invest that $50K. That's only 10% extra investment, but that might increase your average nightly rate by 30%. Right. So I think that's the mindset that we have to have, of like, literally thinking like, how can I make this Instagrammable? Can I make this house Instagrammable? Right. And how do I do that?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. When people come to me and they're asking me, okay, where can I purchase? I want the best Airbnb. I want a low price, and I want it to make the most money. And I really tell them, well, if you want to find that needle in the haystack, then you've got to have something extra special. And really, right now, if you don't have a swimming pool in this area, then it's you're not going to be competitive at all, because that's almost a standard here. So you have to do things to really make yourself stand out. Yeah, it's getting 100%. A lot more competitive. Yeah. So one other list, Mashvisor. Have you heard of Mashvisor? Yeah,
they're similar to Airbnb. AirDNA.
AirDNA. Right? Yeah, they are similar. They started out more as a real estate investment company first, and then they went out into short-term rentals. But so their criteria is looking at cap rate and cash on cash return, your monthly rental income, what your occupancy rate is, medium home prices, and local regulations. So they're the only list that I found that really took into consideration what the local regulations are. And they did most of their markets on their list are small ones. And so, but these small cities are about at least within an hour's drive of the big metropolitan area. So the people who are, in the big metropolitan area want someplace close and easy to go to. And that's what these cities on their list represent. So you have Pulaski, Virginia. Look at this, median property price, $144,600. Cash on cash return, 9.88.
Wow.
Spring Grove, Illinois, median property price, $253,600. You're looking at cash on cash return at 9.8. Osceola, Wisconsin. I used to live in Minneapolis, and I used to go to Wisconsin quite often. It's beautiful there 6 months out of the year. Median property price is $268,600. and cash on cash return 9.2%. Then you have Franklin, New Hampshire, cash on cash 9.23, Battlefield, Missouri 8.95. You've got a St. Roberts, Missouri at 8.9, and there's another place in Wisconsin, Indiana, Maryland, Caledonia, Michigan. So these are smaller, areas that not a lot of people have heard about. But does that surprise you that they would have that high of a cash on cash return?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a lot more attractive than those other lists for a couple of reasons. Number one is like the values of the homes are a lot more affordable, and and obviously that that's related to that cash on cash rate. But like cash on cash for 10%, close to 10% is really good. And it's really interesting. Most of these places that you mentioned, I've never heard of.
Me either. And
So-
I know you're not from the United States originally, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And where's your home country?
It's the Netherlands.
Netherlands. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but you have a lot of experience buying all over the world, which is really interesting. I think that should be another show. But but I know a lot of your audience is from the United States. But yeah, and I bet you that not, the audience that's listening, not a lot of them have heard of these towns either.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, if you were to ask me like what, in the next like 3 to 5 years, what are going to be, what like 5 years from now, looking back, what are the hottest markets looking back? My bet is that those tiny little towns that no one's heard of, those are going to be outperforming, I think, versus kind of like the usual suspects of, the Joshua Tree and the, the Maui and the Kissimmee and all those places that keep popping up in these lists for the last 5 years.
Right.
So that's my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting to see how things are going to shape up. And I think a lot of it will also depend on, what's going on with our economy. How much are interest rates really going to go up, and is that going to be able to, help, squash the inflation that's going on.
Yeah.
But you know what, to put things in perspective, if you are looking at cash on cash and you are able to get loans, we're still way, way low, even at, if we have 5% interest, a low point in the history in the last 40 years in regards to what we're paying for interest. So,
yeah,
that's
100%.
consider.
Yeah. And that could change very quickly. And as if interest rates do go up, then that's going to bring property values down as well, right? So that's like one of the scenarios that we have to keep in mind as well. Is like, okay, also when you're thinking about, do I get a fixed rate for the next 10, 20, 30 years, or do I get a variable rate? Because the variable rate is usually higher, but then the variable rate is usually lower, right? The lowest interest rate you will get on but that could change because it's variable, so you're not fixing it,
right?
So that's the question that you want to ask yourself too, is like, oh, should I get it like 1 year fixed at like 4%, or should I get 10-year fixed at 5%? And I'm just making these numbers up, but but my gut feeling is like, I'd rather pay a little bit more and have it fixed for longer, because of that risk that I see that interest rates will actually go up substantially over the next year.
It can't go down much further, can it? So it's kind of obvious what's going to happen.
I know, right? I know, but that's true. But I would have said the same thing 5 years ago, though, where I'm like, we're at historic lows. We can't go any lower. But then it still kept dropping. But recently, the last like 3 to 6 months or so, it's been going up, right? So
we'll
see if that's a trend or not. Yeah.
The Fed has announced that they are going to make at the least 4 interest rate increases for 2022.
Yeah.
So we know that's going to happen. So a lot to think about. But so that's kind of the list. And I kind of am really, really more focused in now on, where are those places just outside of the big metropolitan areas that are drive to, that have a lot of fun nature things to do. And one area popular is the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. And last year, I think it's called Sevierville, or someplace pronounced it Sevierville, is really, really popular. And I'm just really excited about purchasing a cabins in the Smokies, somewhere around there. And that seems to be kind of, there's small towns around there, and kind of, is very popular on all the lists.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's wrap this up. We've been talking for a long time already.
I know. Well, at least we got through like four major lists, right?
Yeah. I think we did a pretty good job. So do you have any final thoughts or final things to share with the audience?
Well, if you want to get a hold of me and you want information in regards to follow up on investments, you can get a hold of me from my website at CastleLux Rentals. And also on Instagram, I am I'm at Tia Castle. And we're coming out with that book again. I got to plug that book. And so that's on my Insta if you want to see what that's about.
Awesome. So Tia Castle, at Tia Castle, Instagram, and then the two websites. We'll put up the links. And again, I know you're redoing that your personal website. Let me know when that's up, and because I want to watch that show that you did.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I really wanted to ask you what's going on with your Thai rental, the one in Thailand that you have.
The one in Bang Saray.
Yes.
Yeah. That's been challenging because Thailand is still one of the most restricted countries when it comes to travel, like in the Philippines too. So those units are still largely empty, unfortunately.
Okay, so you're just waiting it out.
I'm just exactly. Like, fortunately, they were very small investments because the prices are very, very,
very inexpensive, right?
So it's like, you know what I mean? So that's fortunately, like, I'm not losing too much on it. But yeah, I think in the future, I think that those regions, especially Philippines and Thailand, I think in the future, those regions are going to do really, really well, because I'm just imagining that China is going to open up more and more, and people are, as the middle class is growing there, people want to go to the beach, and there's not a lot of pretty beaches in China. So that's how I kind of chose those destinations too. I was just like, if I were living in China, like, where can I fly to go to? And those areas are.
Yeah, that's another good way to look at it. Figure out where the people are going to be going before they get there, and get there before they get there.
Exactly. Yeah. Because once they're there, then the real estate prices are like 3x.
Right. Right. That's really smart.
You got to go back to the crystal ball that we talked about.
Yeah. You and your crystal ball. Okay. I'm going to be calling you on that. Well, thanks, Jasper. It's been great talking to you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming back on the show. And, again, for people, if they want to check out your website, tiacastle.com. And what was the other one?
And my vacation rental company is CastleLuxRentals.com.
CastleLuxRentals.com. And you're in Florida.
Yes, sir.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thanks, Tia. Thanks for everybody who is listening. And Eric and I will be back on Friday with an episode of STR Conversations. So I will see you then.
I'll be listening.